Aya Nichols is a name that resonates with resilience, faith, and unwavering determination. Born in the city of Beirut, Lebanon, her journey took her from the chaos of war to the quiet corridors of theology. As a Lebanese author, public speaker, and Bible teacher, she weaves her life experiences into a tapestry of hope, inviting women to encounter Jesus through the sacred pages of Scripture. Welcome to my show. Today I'm joined by Aya Nichols, a woman whose journey is truly nothing less than a miracle. Join me as we dive into her very inspiring story. I'm so appreciative that you came on my show today. Thank you so much. I loved reading all about you, and your story is definitely so inspiring.
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it's always been a dream of mine to be on a TV show, so this is cool for me. Yeah. Telling my friends, hi mom. Should be watching on YouTube, I know. But it is, I think I have struggled a lot with what we've been through and had a lot of shame that came with that and telling my story. So I think finally having God heal me enough in this huge journey in order for me to be able to write it and then publish and having that be out there for the world to read and everything else.
So let's start by telling people, let's start from the beginning. Let's tell people who you are. You were born in Beirut, Lebanon.
Yes.
And let's just start from there, and let's skip through it kind of briefly, but let's just tell people who you are and how you came to be here.
Sure. That part of my life is kind of hazy just because I was there. Let me restart.
Okay.
Not hazy, just hard for me to go back and remember.
Oh, okay. Well, let me stop you. If it's too painful, we don't have to talk about it.
No, it's fine. It's just we just met and now we're going for it, so that's fine. Yeah. That's the whole book, which is fine. But to answer your question, yes, I was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon. I came to the States. I left Lebanon when I was 9 and went to England, where we were applying for our citizenship because our dad was an authorized citizen there, and we were wanting to get out of Lebanon. My mom, she was part of the Lebanese war, so she experienced a lot of the war trauma that led to her having schizophrenia. Yeah. So she developed this fantasy idea of living in America. So she just went after that, and then she just took us along. So I just remember one night when I was 9, she wakes us all up. We didn't go to school because she was too paranoid for us to be away from her. So my life in Lebanon, it was just very different from my life here. And when I left and went to England, that was my first introduction to the Western English world, because I didn't even know English at that point. I didn't even know who the Easter Bunny was. Oh, wow. Someone had to explain that to me in 6th grade. Oh, wow. It's very embarrassing to find out that in 6th grade you don't know who the Easter Bunny is. So I had a lot of those kind of moments. Yeah.
So I want to go back a little bit. Your mom, working in the mental health field, I definitely understand the PTSD, the schizophrenia from experiencing something because it was a war-torn, she saw the war. Yeah. When she grew up there, she saw that, and that had to be, my heart goes out to her because that had to be terrible. No wonder she wanted to leave. And you hear about America and how great America is. That's everybody's dream, is to leave, especially if you're in the middle of a war and it's caused you a lot of mental health problems. And then I can see her wanting to get her children out of there. So even to go to England first, that was the beginning of your journey. Yeah. So I want to hold up the book real quick before we go any further. So you wrote a book all about your whole journey. It's called The Unseen. And I'll tell you something, your story is, like I said earlier, so inspiring, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning that you're only 29 years old, but you have lived 3 lifetimes.
It definitely feels like it.
I mean, you look young. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you don't look young. You definitely look young. But before I met you, I thought that you were older, at least in your 40s, because you have gone through so much.
I think that's been really hard in my lifetime because I had to be able to relate to kids my age. And because I felt so advanced that I couldn't relate with anyone.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I'm trying to find myself, and like instead of trying to relate myself to someone else, is figure out who I am and what my voice is.
Right.
And that way I can know what I even want to listen to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how hard of a transition was it to leave Lebanon and even go to England? I mean, how hard was it to transition there? And you stayed there for 2 years before coming here, right? Or how long did you stay in
A
England?
year.
A year. So how hard? So see, you've gone through some major changes, like enough changes that it could have caused PTSD in you as well, because like, you know, that's a lot for a child to handle. That's a lot for an adult to handle, but for a child especially.
yeah, I would say my time in England, it was mostly us spending our time in motel rooms. Just we probably spent in a motel room for about 5 months, and the whole point wasn't to stay long. At least that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So I think once time just continued to progress and we're still here, I realized, okay, we may actually be staying here and we're not going back to Lebanon.
Yeah.
And I never really had that time to think of me leaving my home, going to a different country, like changing identity. That all didn't hit me till way after. At this point, I'm just in this trauma role where I'm just protecting myself.
Yeah.
So, that in England was where our mother's schizophrenia was getting a lot worse, just because she didn't have as much support. And because of that, she started calling a lot of ambulances to come get her. And they led to her wanting to hospitalize her, which then she decided, okay, that was time for us to pack up and go to the United States.
Yeah.
And the way she told us was, we came home from school and she says, we're going to go to America for the weekend. I'm like, really? She's like, yes, DC. I'm like, okay, that sounds fun. And in my head, I'm like, we're not staying for the weekend.
Yeah.
But either way, I say this in my book, where I had an assignment due that following Monday that I was already behind. So I was excited to be out of that, and that's what gave me motivation to just go along with it.
Yeah.
So I sit there and question.
Yeah. So were you happy though to leave Lebanon and even be in England for a year? Were you happy that you weren't going back home, or did you miss your home? Because you were a child, so.
I definitely miss my home. I still miss it because I continue to go back and now develop the relationship I've developed with it now. Feels like I've almost been robbed of something that I should have been able to have. It's like growing up and being that teenager in the Middle East and experiencing those cultures, and now like how that influences my adulthood.
Yeah.
But because I was adopted at 15 into an American family, I had to now hold up all the American standards of a 15-year-old, which were very different.
Yeah. Was your family, your adoptive family, were they open to allow you to explore your heritage and your roots, really?
Yes. They even had my mom, before she married my dad, she, at a previous marriage, had a daughter who went to Lebanon and did charity work with them at an orphanage. So whenever we got adopted, she brought her in, and they always welcomed our culture, they even put our sister in belly dancing classes.
Oh, wow. Oh,
so she really did enjoy that. She didn't stick to it, but she did like it.
You know, it's very important when children are taken in too. So you guys were all taken by CPS.
Yes.
Child Protective Services. When you came here, you have a sister and a brother.
Two sisters.
Two sisters and a brother. And you were separated from your brother for a time, right? And then you all got adopted by the same family, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So how hard was that? Like, okay, so I imagine. So I'm just seeing trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. You know, you had a mother who was ill. That's enough to, like, you don't understand when you're a child. You went to England. You wanted to go back home. You missed your home. Then you came to America for the weekend. Then you were taken by CPS. I mean, how hard was that? I know I asked you that, but when you got taken by CPS, did you ever just say, I give up? Like, what, I give up? Or was that the beginning of something new in your life?
It was definitely a beginning of something new in my life, because being taken by CPS, it was definitely a drastic change to a person's life. Because each story is different on how they were taken. Mine, they brought a social worker to my school, and I just went straight to our CPS office with her, and then went straight to our emergency foster home that night. My sisters, they had a little rendezvous with my mom where she tried to, like, because they found out that they picked me up, she tried to hide them. So she went to McDonald's, and then she just went back to the apartment because she didn't know what else to do, and they were just there waiting for her. So they got some trash bags, and they were able to grab a few things. When we got to, when they got back to the office, and then all of us, my brother was separated. He went to a different foster home, and my sisters and I stayed together in the beginning in the emergency foster home. And that's when I realized I went home with nothing but the clothes that I was wearing.
Yeah.
And like looking at my foster parents and them looking at me like, what do we do with her? She doesn't have, and I was bigger than my sisters. They were a lot thinner than me, so I couldn't wear their clothes. So it became this whole embarrassing moment in my first experience of foster care.
Yeah.
And there are like a million other things that foster kids experience in the day, much less anything. So it is hard. It's a hard adjustment.
Yeah, I'm glad that you are so mature, and I think that probably helped a lot, and so resilient. I hate to use that word because people say kids are resilient, almost as if their experiences don't matter. Oh, they'll bounce back. They're resilient. That's not always true because you carry that trauma with you for the rest of your life, but you seem very well adjusted to me. I mean, and the book, and I know like writing a book is therapy. Listen,
Yes.
It's therapy. So I'm glad you were able to put your story out there. But I know that your dad was actually granted custody of you, but he never showed up, correct? He did.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be picking us up from the airport to get on the plane, and he just never showed up to the airport.
So how big of a letdown was that? Well, I guess what I'm trying to get around to, was there ever a time in your life where you were just like, I give up, I quit, I want to go back to Lebanon no matter what, I don't want to do this, I don't want to have this American dream that my mom wanted to have?
There was never a time that I thought I had the option to give up.
Oh, okay, good.
Like, I think when you're in survival mode, like,
Yeah.
it's like you will do anything to survive. So it's not like, am I going to give up? Am I going to survive the day?
Yeah.
It's not much of you, like, just letting go of something.
Yeah.
It's like just surrendering to what you fight constantly to.
Yeah.
So
Like you didn't have a choice. You just had to do it. You had to live.
I did.
Yeah.
And then that's what I think a lot of kids don't realize, especially in foster care after, is that once they're out of foster care, now they have to deal with all the trauma that they have, that they just experienced in foster care. But they still have to be adults. They still have to take care of themselves, pay the rent, find food.
Yeah.
So they don't have that time to be able to go and actually think back and be like, yeah, that did hurt.
Yeah.
These people hurt me. So we take it out on other people for the rest of our life just because we were never given the time to actually just go back and deal with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really, I think God blessed me with, was about now 3.5, 4 years ago, I came to a point in my life, I guess that was it, where I give up.
Yeah.
And that landed me in a residential home. And they kept trying to convince me why not to give up. And to the point where they had me write on my hand, life, and then death, and then just, and a divide. And then every action I do that day, is it towards life, or is it towards death? And every action I would do, I saw, is towards death. And and those were the demons that were haunting me from my past, that I was wrestling with, that I didn't want to deal with, that would come back, and then I don't want to deal with it. So I choose something else. I choose to numb. I choose to run away. I choose to blame somebody else. Finally, having the strength through therapy and a lot of EMDR, 3 years worth of EMDR, I've been able to now accept my story as something that God has given me. And I want that for other foster kids.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to cry. Like, I'm sitting here trying not to cry because I love that they had you to write that on your hand, because it caused you to examine every action you were taking. And I love that. Gosh, I hope that our viewers can really grasp that, what you just said, and maybe put that into practice in their own lives. I'm really trying not to cry here. So I want to talk about how, so you and your sisters ended up with the Rhodes family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But then I love the story about how your brother ended up there. They were actually watching.
My brother,
He
he never
Oh, I
got
thought he-
adopted with us.
Oh, I thought he did. I thought they were watching like Wednesday's Child and saw him.
That was us.
It was you? Oh,
Yes.
okay. Oh,
So
wow.
our parents, at first, they were the first people they called for our emergency home back when we first got taken away. Now, 2.5, 3 years later, when we were in foster care long enough, they put us on Wednesday's Child, me and my sisters, and that's when my parents were able to find a link, and they saw that, and they remembered that that's who they called. Again, the details are more in the book, and it explains it more. And I had my parents even like write their version within it, just because I do care about providing that kind of information for other adoptive parents, because I find that, and I work with a lot of agencies that lack information about what it's like to be an adoptee, what it's like to be a foster kid and a foster parent and an adoptive parent. And the challenges, the real challenges and the emotional challenges that go with that. And I don't think we talk enough about the emotional challenges. And that's what took, you continue to ask me about my final moment of when I give up. I think my mom reached that point when I was 16. But she kept going. She could have taken me back. She could have disrupted me and taken me away from my sisters, which is why I wanted to get adopted. But she let this teenager who had experienced all this trauma, all this adjusting, going from Lebanon to here, doesn't know how to make friends, hardly speaks the language, can't do math, can't spell. My mom would sit there with flashcards, trying to teach us and like math and everything else. So she filled in that gap for us. But that took an everyday type of sacrifice.
You know, I love that you said that, because you have to have, parents have to be committed, like especially foster parents, because when you take a child in that you may know what they've gone through, but you don't feel it like they do. And then pain has a way of coming to the top. It always comes out, and it's going to come out. You know, I used to work in a mental health residential facility, and you know, we had young people that would come, and that pain was coming out of them from things that they'd gone through. And so you don't, you just have to be there for them. Sometimes you have to just let it come out. I mean, they will stand and cuss you and scream and do everything. I had a guy raise a pool stick to me twice and try to hit me with it, you know, and you just have to let them vent and do that. And I'm so glad that your mom hung in there with you and was patient with you and allowed you to have that time to figure out who you were and what you wanted. So,
Well, actually, I wouldn't say that she did. That was the lack of. And we experienced that. And she would say that she didn't have that support to where we could have developed that relationship. Because instead, I continually had therapy like 2, 3 times a week. And the problem was always me. I had to change. So after a while, my therapist essentially taught me to just hide my emotions, pick my battles. And I'm like, okay, not deal with the past, not deal with why I'm screaming at my mom over nothing, over just one look across the table. But just, was that really a point in your life where you should have done it? If you stick to the surface, you'll never get rid of it. It will just keep popping up. It's like a virus. And the more you try to kill it instead of the root, the more it's going to come. So it is hard.
I was going to say, it's always like rooted so deep inside of us. And until we get in there and pull that root out, listen, you know, I'm reminded, like years ago, I wrote this thing and this little short paper about how I was out pulling weeds, and you know, I pulled the weeds one day, and a few days later they were back, and I was like, how'd that happen? Because I didn't get to the root. So then I sat down and I took a little thing and I dug that root out, and they didn't come back, you know. So we have to get there and find out what's actually where the root of it is, and then get that out. So you made it through, thank God.
Yes.
And then after you graduated high school, you went back to England to reconnect with your father.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that. How was that experience? Did he ever tell you why he didn't show up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, it wasn't, whenever I was going to Lebanon, going back to England, it wasn't about meeting my dad. It was about me reconnecting with my uncle. So my uncle and my aunt live in England, and I have a very close relationship with them, and they flew me over. When I got there and was at my uncle's place, my dad called them, in which he called me and said that he wants to come meet me, and if I was willing. And I said, okay. So he comes for a week, and I remember the first, we were picking him up from the airport, and it's been now 5, 6 years since I've had any communication with him. I don't even know how he's aged or how I felt, because I never got to talk to him when he left. He just left. And when he stepped out of that gate, I just remember him walking by, and it was my dad. It was Baba. Like, nothing had changed, because he was still the same person to me. And that was, as confusing as that was, it was also very healing in some aspects, because I realized maybe he can still be a part of me. And so the entire week we spent together, we would just go visit the Big Ben. We would go see the M&M store. He took me to the Egyptian mall. That's very fancy. So like we had a time of our life. We saw so many castles. I'm addicted. So, and I have pictures of those to where I don't think my dad, because he worked his entire life in Lebanon, he and I never had that one-on-one time. And for the first time, we did that. And so at the end of it, I couldn't just leave without knowing why. And he just continued explaining the situation, how he couldn't sell the pharmacy. It was in my mother's name, situation, circumstance. And I was listening to him and realized he just wasn't strong enough. Like, at the end of the day, like, he couldn't take in 4 kids and provide to them in a different country altogether, because that's what the judge was requiring. They wouldn't allow us to go back to Lebanon because of the political situation. So then my dad had to go, Baba had to go and find an entire house, work, everything, entire life in England for us. So I think that's the type of strength I'm talking about. It's like uprooting. He was born in Lebanon, his whole family's in Lebanon, so it's like asking him to uproot his entire life to another country. And I was listening, and he just wasn't strong enough, and I can't blame a person for their weakness.
Yeah, but you know what? At the same time, he made that sacrifice for you, because look what a great life you've had here. And I mean, I know you had your struggles, and it was probably there were times, I'm sure, that your life you felt like it was horrible. I mean, I'm sure with everything you went through, but I do want to go here, talk about this, which I'm fascinated by, because it's only been like 14 years since you got adopted, right? And you went from barely being able to speak English, and now you hold a master's degree in Christian education. So that is like, I'm blown away by that. Yeah, I'm just blown away. So how did you go? You were a Sunni Muslim.
Yes.
How did you convert to Christianity? That's what I'm just so fascinated by. How did you come to know Jesus and accept that, and turn from from being a Muslim?
Yeah. Honestly, that's an answer that I'm still discovering as I know and get to know the Lord more. Because when I was a Sunni Muslim, we would celebrate, my aunts all wore the hijab. We had to go through the laws, and we had to pray 7 times a day. We had a clock in the middle of the city where it rang in the middle of the night to remind us to get up and pray. We had to wear these holy garments and bow down to each time. And it's all out of respect. And that was a huge element within Islam, is that respect area that I, as a woman, had a hard time, just because it involved me in it. There's a lot in Islam, there's a lot of things of how a woman respects versus how a man loves.
Yeah.
And like, it's as if our love is through respect. In some aspects, I think that's just the way the guys are wired. So yes, but I think earning that respect is how we all work through that. But as an 8-year-old who had nothing to offer, and realizing that my brother had all these different advantages that I never could. It's as if just by being a woman, I was broken. And that just didn't sit well with me. It didn't sit well that I had to earn my God's love when I had nothing to offer. So that was 8. At this point, I just silently obeyed. I hoped for something better, but I really did want to follow him, Allah. But I have my aunt and my uncle is still in my life. We still talk, who are devout. So me even saying that's hard, especially in public. When I became a sophomore in college, I found this organization called Crew. And at this point, my parents were Lutheran, and they took us to church. And I learned a lot about Luther, about the church, and customs, songs, but not a lot about Jesus. And that's why whenever I went off to college, I just wanted to get away and have whatever, like, the young life, the non-mature life,
the college experience.
Like one that's like free of worries, free of trying to figure out my next meal, my next everything. And by the end of it, after a year of that, I realized it was so empty. All these relationships that I made that I would call my sisters because I joined a sorority, they meant nothing. I didn't even know if they had siblings. So I wanted something more. I wanted something bigger in my life. And when one of my friends from the sorority got invited to Crew, and she invited me to come with her. And since I went to church with my parents, I'm like, I'll give you support, yes. And I remember showing up there the first day and it feeling like home. And I went back and forth because trying to live the life of a college student and trying to know who Christ is and surrender my life to him and then be sanctified by him. It was so much, but he gave me so much grace in it every step. So I am very, very grateful.
Gosh, that's going to make me cry. You know, I was thinking about, when you were talking about that, how in the Muslim, you felt like you had to like earn Allah's love. It's almost like you feel, I would think, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, but you felt sort of like, I would think that you would have felt sort of trapped or something, but like in Jesus, there's freedom. You know, I mean, because I think even the Bible says something about where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom or liberty.
Exactly.
And so as you were telling me that, I was thinking about, he always knows where we are. He knows where we are all the time. And so he saw you as a child in Lebanon, and he knew the path that you would have to take to come to him. And it's, you know, even though it was hard, it's beautiful that you surrendered your life to him and that you were completely changed. So, love it. Listen, I'm so sorry to make you cry.
I'm just very grateful for the life he gave me.
Yeah.
And the path that I have, because every step I'm learning how he was there from the beginning.
Yeah.
How he had a plan from the beginning. And that means that I was never alone.
Yeah.
So having that comfort allows me to have joy in my life.
Yeah.
Allows me to be able to go have fun on the 4th of July,
Yeah.
shoot fireworks from my backyard and hope my house doesn't burn. Seriously.
You know, I love it because I look back at my life and, you know, I've been through a lot of things too, but nothing like yours, but I mean, a lot of hard things, but I see that thread of God through my whole life from the time I was a little girl. Even times I felt like, where are you? Even recently, you know, my husband passed away 5 weeks ago. And so even recently I've been questioning, I'm like, God, where are you? But I know he's right here. And so I'll be out of this one day and I can look back and go, he was right there, because he always has been. So I'm so sorry, but listen.
Honestly, no, because I just recently became friends with you on Facebook, so I just found that out.
Yeah.
And was able to see just a little bit of glimpses of your grief.
Yeah.
And that's something that I genuinely struggle with the most, to the point where before, when my husband proposed and we were engaged, I would have these sobbing prayers about me dying first, because I can never experience him leave, like having him be removed. Like I already experienced so much loss in my life. Like there's only but so much a person can take. So I can't have any control over it, which is why I started praying then. I'm like, maybe I get the head of it because I asked first.
Yeah.
But which brings me back to you, because that kind of pain I can't imagine. But I can't wait to see how God uses that to transform your life. Because he really does. My sisters and I are constantly learning how he takes the pain in our life and makes it into something so beautiful. And I hold on to that. So let the pain come.
Thank you. Oh, listen. I just want to thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story. Even though, like, and when I say it's a beautiful story, I don't want you to think I'm taking away any of your pain at all.
I know. But I think a lot of people actually struggle with that, because they come up to me, they're like, oh, I loved your book. Wait.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry because you went through all those things. So it's like, I want them to come out of it feeling hope. So, and that's what I see in their eyes. So I feel encouraged. But that's why it's okay for my church.
Like
it's
I don't want to
okay.
diminish anything you've been through, but the fact that you came from where you came from and could have had an extremely different outcome, and to where the Lord has brought you now, it's beautiful. It is, and it is a story of hope. And I just want to say thank you so much, and thank you for writing this, you guys. You can get this on Amazon. We're going to put the link at the end of the show on the screen, and thank you for being a guest today.
Thank you again for having me. I appreciate it.
I loved hearing your story. So
thank you.
Thank you for watching today. I hope that you found Aya's story as inspiring as I have. I know you have. Head over to Amazon and get her book. Like I said, we'll put it on the screen at the end of the show. And join me again next week for another great guest. And remember to always dream big, because big dreams do come true.